West of Arkham, the hills rise wild, and there are valleys with deep woods that no axe has ever cut. There are dark, narrow glens, where the trees slope at fantastic angles, and where thin brooks trickle, having never caught a glint of sunlight. On the more gentle slopes are found farms, ancient and rocky, with squat, moss-coated cottages in the shade of great ledges, brooding eternally over old secrets. But these are all vacant now, their wide chimneys crumbling, and shingled walls bulging most perilous beneath low gambrel roofs. The old tenants have abandoned their properties, and new foreigners prefer not to live there. French Canadians have tried it, Italians have tried it, and the Germans have come and departed. It is not because of anything that can be seen or heard or touched, but because of something beyond imagination. This place at night does not bring restful dreams. It is this which keeps the foreigners away. Old Ammi Pierce never told anybody everything that he recalls of the strange days gone by. Ammi, who is a well-known eccentric, is the only one who still remains, the only one who ever talks of the past. He dares do this only because his house is so near to open fields, so near to the travelled roads of Arkham. Traces still remain of another road, which ran over the hills otherwise untouched, and through the valleys of unharvested lumber, that ran through the middle of the wasteland, known to the local residents as the Blasted Heath. People declined to use it, and an alternate route was hacked from the New England wood, one that curved far to the south. Traces of the old one can still be seen beneath the weeds of returning wilderness, but not for long. Soon the hollows will be flooded for the new reservoir. Then the wood will enter a new darkness, and the uncultivated wasteland will slumber far below blue waters, the surface a mirror of the sky, rippling in a gentle breeze. The secrets of these strange days of the past will merge with the secrets of the deep, and become one with all other hidden lore, and the mysteries of primal earth. When I went into the hills to make a scientific survey of the land, in advance of the new reservoir, the locals told me the wild land was dangerous. Knowledge of the vile nature of the wild forest hereabouts was passed down in whispers, from grandparents in earnest warning to young children, for over 100 years. When they told me about the Blasted Heath, it seemed to me very odd and theatrical, and I wondered how this angst had infected the folklore of those who boast Puritan roots. Then I saw for myself that dark tangle of uncultivated land. When I saw the wasteland, it was morning, but the land remained shadowy and dark. Where the forest intervened, the trees grew too thickly, and their trunks were too big in circumference for any healthy New England wood. It made passage through the forest exceedingly arduous, and there was too much silence in the narrow alleys between the boles of the trees, and the forest floor was exceedingly soft with dank moss and the rotting matter of decades of decay. The only other open spaces were along the course of the old road, where there had been little hillside farms. Sometimes all the buildings still stood, sometimes only one or two, and sometimes the only sign of human habitation was a lone chimney, or a stone cellar filled with debris. Weeds and thorns predominated, and unidentified furtive animals rustled in the undergrowth. Everything seemed to present itself with a grotesque touch of the unreal, as if some vital element of perspective was awry, or there was some unnatural distribution of light and shade. This was no region in which to sleep. It was too much like a landscape out of nightmare, too much like some forbidden woodcut in the blasphemous book of the Necronomicon. But my thoughts continued to return to the blasted heath. Without ever prior having seen it, I knew it at once. At the bottom of a wide valley, I first came upon it. The poet must have coined that phrase, blasted heath, after seeing this particular region. I thought it must be the outcome of a fire. But why had nothing new ever grown here? 5 acres of grey desolation, sprawled open to the sky, like a great spot eaten by acid. It lay north of the abandoned road line. I would approach the scar, only because my business took me through and past it. It bore no trace of vegetation of any kind across its broad expanse, just a fine grey dust or ash. But the ash lay undisturbed by wind. The trees at its periphery were sickly and stunted, interspersed with dead and rotting trunks. As I hurried across the center, I saw the tumbled field stones of an old foundation on my right, and the yawning black maw of an abandoned well, whose rising stagnant vapors altered the hues of sunlight. Even the winding trek through the woodland beyond was welcome in contrast. I was puzzled no longer by the frightening lore of the settlers of Arkham. The place was remote and lonely. On my return to civilization at twilight, dreading to revisit that ominous location, I took a circuitous route to town by the new road to the south. That evening I asked several older people in Arkham about the blasted heath, and about the nature of the strange days past of which they spoke. The majority, however, declined further explanation. Then I was surprised that the trouble was much more recent than I assumed. It was not such an old legend after all, but incidents within the lifetime of those who spoke. Less than 40 years passed. An entire family had either disappeared or was killed. Much more I could not learn, but because they all told me to pay no attention to the crazy tales of old Ammi Pierce, the first thing in the morning I sought him out. He lived alone in a dilapidated cottage, where the forest begins to thicken. I caught that odor which clings about a house which has stood too long. After my knocking at the door was met with silence, I turned away without regret, in fact with relief, only then to hear a shuffling from within. The door was pushed open by an old man, a man with a white beard and a timid demeanor. His limbs were not weak, but his eyes were, and his spectacles were very thick. I lied, and presented myself on a matter of business. I inquired after other property owners in the area of the survey. Ammi Pierce was more educated than I had been led to think. He understood the requirements of my vocation more than any other man with whom I had talked in Arkham. He had not heard of the plans for the reservoir. He protested not at the great swath of forest and farmland to be blotted out, though perhaps he might have done, had not his home lain outside the boundary of the future lake. In fact, he seemed very pleased, his eyes widening in delight at the fate of the forest soon to be lost. To him it seemed the ancient wood was better under water, as if that condition might prevent the return of the strange days. In spite of the warmth of that summer day, I found myself chilled as the old man continued to explain his reasoning. When the long-winded storyteller had finished his tale, unwilling for the stars to catch me in the open, I hurried back before sunset to my hotel in town. The survey had only just begun, and yet the very next day I returned to Boston, where I submitted my resignation. I could not risk another day in the dark forest. I could not face the grayish blasted heath, where the solitary well yawned black and deep beside the tumble of bluestone. The land will still be flooded with the reservoir, and the secrets I learned will be hidden forever beneath watery fathoms. If by some stroke of misfortune I find myself passing again through Arkham, no amount of money could compel me there to drink from the new city water system.